In the early 2000s, I was drawn into the world of Puyo Puyo and its numerous spin-offs, and I was fascinated by how its characters originate from Mado Monogatari, a series of dungeon crawlers. More than 2 decades later, I'm fascinated by the fact that the brand is back. Fia and the Wondrous Academy is a new entry, but the catch is that the human protagonists are all new, while several classic enemies return. I'm Vin with CFG Games, let's dive into this unique entry. Fia wants to follow her grandmother's footsteps by becoming an established mage. However, a set of zany circumstances propel her and her classmates into potential expulsion from the academy. So Fia and her new friends must learn to work together and prove themselves. To kick things off, this game's characterization and writing are its strongest assets. Fia and her classmates fall into established archetypes, but even though they seem familiar, their personalities clash in hyperactive and over-the-top humorous ways. I also thoroughly enjoyed the voice actor's line delivery. It is at times poignantly passionate and emphatic, and as silly as they may seem, these characters really are relatable, and they even show some surprises along the way. The classic Mado Monogatari and Puyo Puyo enemies introduce a degree of absurdity that throws the party members off guard. They often have misconceptions regarding these enemies, and they have to figure out how to act accordingly. I often looked forward to seeing which classic enemy would return in the next world, particularly as they haven't been prominent in Puyo Puyo games for quite some time. The game is also easy to pick up and play. The party alternates between preparing at the academy to dungeon crawling through randomly generated floors. The progression is reminiscent of roguelikes as players defeat monsters, acquire loot, dodge obstacles, and keep an eye on their hunger gauge as they reach each floor's exit. And even as the game adds fishing, gardening, and cooking into the mix, it never feels overwhelming. The combat occurs in real time inside of small enclosed spaces, but even though you can move around freely and dodge attacks, the skill's cooldowns create the feeling of taking turns. The skill and item menus are straightforward, and it's always easy to pick teammates on the fly. Overall, the game does feel fairly snappy. You can even save after each floor, which is perhaps too generous, but it does let you take breaks as need be. Unfortunately, numerous elements lack impact. For one, the actual dungeons themselves are not particularly exciting. In stark contrast with the characters' colorful designs, the dungeons seem stark and visually uninteresting. The layouts often feel basic. Although I initially broke every single object and looted each floor, at a certain point, I just rushed towards the exit to get through the dungeon as I wanted to see the next dialogue sequence. The obstacles are also not particularly inspired. Objects like spikes, arrow tiles, and fire jets are overly familiar and unsurprising. And the main story quests and subquests often have you revisit places a bit too often. I would have liked to see more dungeon tile sets, or at least more flourishes to differentiate each floor. The loot also seems a bit haphazard. Dungeons can inundate you with items, but few seem impactful. On the one hand, the sheer number of items incentivizes using them regularly, but on the other hand, having so many crafting materials, ingredients, food items, and item boxes doesn't necessarily create a more fulfilling looting experience. And even if you use a key to access chests and treasure rooms, the actual payoff often feels underwhelming. Another lacking element is the music. The main battle track is upbeat and appropriate enough, but the dungeon tracks are really more functional and serviceable than anything else, and the battle victory song just epitomizes some of these songs' short loops. The overall visual presentation is just a bit too plain. The use of live 2D creates sufficiently animated characters during dialogue sequences, but the polygonal models don't have mouth flaps, and they often repeat the same poses, sometimes without any intermediary animations. And the user interface is visually sparse and functionally a bit funky. In combat, you need to look away from the menu to know when your skills are ready. If you have a full inventory, opening chests or getting items after battles can lead to a clunky experience as you're not given extra menus for tossing your stuff. Hopefully some of these quirks can be alleviated in the future. The biggest downside is that the enemy encounters just feel a bit too flat. The enemies largely don't move around that much, and they don't provide that much resistance, so you generally don't need the most finesse to plow through them. Furthermore, they resort to palette swaps too often and too quickly, so dungeon traversal just doesn't seem as exciting as it could be. But despite these gripes, I really truly do appreciate the game's dialogue and interactions. The characters, their growth, and their sense of camaraderie are interesting and endearing. Carbuncle's unpredictable hijinks will undoubtedly put a smile on your face. So although I wish the dungeons matched the characters' whimsicality and charm, the game still provides an easy to pick up dungeon crawling experience. So ultimately, your mileage may vary. If you don't mind the general visual and mechanical simplicity in its sense of familiarity, Mado Monogatari Fia and the Wondrous Academy will reward your time with plenty of wacky, heartwarming interactions. Thanks for watching our review. This has been Vim with CFG Games. If you like this review, please subscribe for more reviews and fun features, and we'll see you on the next one.